Hey, welcome back to the workbench, everybody. We've got update on the Jaguar XJS. So previous video did the fuel injector and the fuel rail and all the fuel lines. I've got the spark plugs out. But before I jump into there, let's jump over this way and we will look down into the engine bay. And I want to explain a couple of things if you're working on one of these cars. You'll notice I have a terry cloth or a microfiber cloth here and here. And that is so when you put your hand here or your arm, you don't get waffled by that and end up with waffles on your hand or your elbow or your forearm. So, word of advice. And then obviously I'm using one of these magnetic fender protectors, as you all do, of course. All right, couple of things here. This right here, this black housing is your oil pressure sensor unit or sending unit, and that's what controls your oil pressure. There's a plastic cap on that, and below that is metal housing. Right where, let's move this out of the way. Right where that fuel injector or spark plug is, as you see right there, there is the connector for the oil pressure sensor. See the spark plug? See the connector? So be very careful when you're removing the spark plug. That's word of advice. I've got all the new spark plugs in there, but I have not torqued them down. The other thing to recommend is your coil support housing has 4 bolts. 1, 2, 3, 4 right here. See where I'm pointing at? This. And notice how that bolt hole lines up directly with the vacuum advance. That's perfection at its finest in engineering design. Those are a pain in the yaher to get out of there. The other thing, I have removed the dust cover and I am going to Scotch-Brite that coil rotor, or excuse me, distributor rotor up. Looks like this has been serviced because the centrifugal weights do move pretty easy, as you can see. You hear them clicking down there. So I think those have been lubed up, so I'll just put some motor oil down in there, service specifications, and then we'll go from there. So let's jump back over to the workbench, and I will show you the spark plugs. Here is the coil support bracket. And as it sits in the car with those 4 bolts, as you can see, that bolt hole right there and the one on the back, the only way to get those out of there is with a wobble socket and a very tiny 1/4-inch drive socket and extension. You could use an 11mm wrench like this, and you're going to be able to turn it about 1/8 of an inch, but with this wobble socket, you'll be able to get down in there thusly and avoid this top part of the bracket. It would have been nice if those bolts were somewhere else, but I understand they've got to avoid the cam cover. And anyway, you'll notice that there is a couple of spark plugs with their tips broken. Those are on the rear. This one I broke when I was taking off in front of the oil sending unit. This one was already broken. And this was actually probably broken when it was installed. And look at the rust and corrosion on that electrode. Now, I'm gonna go through a couple of them just to show you some goo. This is the very back one, and these are old Champion RS. We'll get into the gap just a minute, but look at that. Goo and carbon buildup on there. Here's another one, goo, carbon buildup. Look at this one. This is the 3rd one, Bank B. And you just saw that fall out. But look at that. There's no way that could have ignited. It's just built up crud on the electrode tip. And look at this, that came right out of that hole. So be very, very careful. You don't want those falling down into your cylinder on top of your piston. Something like that could get down there and chew up a valve or top of your piston, then you got real problems. So luckily, these have all broken off down where I was able to retrieve them. This is the front one, bank B, driver's side, very front under the compressor. Not too bad, they're just really old. And I think these were the original plugs that were put in, or maybe the first plug change. Bank A looks like it's burning pretty good. Got a really nice, consistent burn pattern on there. The electrodes are all brown, not too much carbon built up on this side, except for this one. Look at that. That is some crud. And then obviously the one that I broke here, whoops, more falling out. There you go. So again, if you're working on an old car, and you know, in my case, you know, these electrodes were broken when they were probably put in and installed, probably not using the correct socket. You want this, you don't want to use a plain old socket like this with no rubber grommet. You want to use the 16, or I think it's a 5. Let me go over there and look. Here it is. It is the 5/8 socket, and as you see, there's the rubber grommet down in there, and that keeps this from, you know, when you're torquing it or removing, from wobbling around and cracking the electrodes. The only reason I broke that one is because I couldn't get the rubber grommet all the way down because of that fuel or the oil pressure sensor. This is the distributor cap, and let's go back over to the car just real quick, and we'll talk about this one, because you see this. Well, let's get under the light over here. There you go. Do you see the discoloration right here? See that? How it's kind of looks like it's gotten hot right there. Maybe that's a better, where could I put it to where it's easier? There you go, see that? Right there, but look at this side. Now, that goes just like, oh, let's see, where does this go? It goes just like that. Number one would be over here. When I took it off, it was like this, with the indicator on the back. This has gotten very hot. And I think what has happened is this has been repaired. As you can see, it is very gooed up with some sort of a RTV sealant or whatever, but it seems to be working. So we've got this. Let me go back over there. Yeah, so look at that, make sure nothing's wrong. I went ahead and cleaned this all up, and, you know, blew some electronics cleaner down in there, and then used my air compressor nozzle and just kind of blew it out. Everything's cleaned up, all ready to go. I'm going to torque the spark plugs, come back and with some brake cleaner or probably some electric contact cleaner, and just get the spark plugs, wipe them off, and then we'll go double check and also clean up the wires, because we're probably just going to reuse those. Look like they're in fairly decent shape. They're not too old, and they're not burnt down here at the end. A little bit of grime and goo on the end there on some of the ones, especially under the where the compressor would be. This, like this one here, is just grease, you know. Just clean that up just a little bit, and wire brush maybe in there, or brass brush. Let's see what else I was going to describe. Oh yes, the spark plug gap. Now, as you know, on the specifications in the workshop manual, it calls for a spark plug gap of 0.035. That is your electrode gap here, 0.035. These were gapped for 0.035, but they were almost 0.040. Just a lot of wear. Through my infinite wisdom in my constant Google researching and using the forums and Jag Lovers website and Kirby, the great Kirby handbook for the Jaguar XJS and XJ6 workshop and knowledge manual, I discovered that originally from the factory, the spark plug gap was 0.025. And for some reason throughout history in the past 35, 40 years, Jaguar started installing them at 0.035. Not 2.5 as it calls for everywhere else, but 0.035. Now, I've discovered that with the Lucas ignition, two coils, right? The alternate in the front and this one that sits over in the Valley of Death. Those are to provide a constant spark resource because you've got 12 cylinders, 12 sparks, and it's 6,000 RPMs. The longer gap is going to use up more energy, and hence the next cylinder wouldn't fire correctly. So come with me. You're going to want to, in my case, this is what I did. I went over here to the engine bay, and there was a placard or a sticker that says right there, see right there where it says 3,000 RTM with distributor vacuum unit disconnected. That's what your advanced timing should be. Spark plug gap 0.025 inches, OBD exempt. It should have had 0.025 inch gapped spark plugs. So that's exactly what I did. I used feeler gauge right here, 0.025 or 0.6, what is that, 0.635 millimeters. Gapped each one of the new spark plugs, and guess what? They were gapped 0.025. I went to the NGK spark plug part research and found that on the NGK spark plug website, they have the gap listed as 0.035, not 25. So that's incorrect. Double check, as I did, your hood decal, because that affects emissions, that affects how much spark is delivered to each cylinder. We're working with a high compression engine here. You don't need much spark, but you need a constant spark, hence the reason the Lucas ignition system requires a less gap than any other Magneti Marelli system. I also discovered that on the top of the rotor seems to be in good shape, by the way. There it is, Lucas. But I discovered also this hole right there is a vent, and it's supposed to have the same kind of a tube as here, but that one is just a tube with a filter on it. And it is supposed to be on the driver's side or the left side of the engine, somewhere over in this area or this area, to provide intake filtered air to the distributor, and then the vacuum line that comes out of the side, see it there, goes back down here, is your vacuum, connects to a vacuum system, and that provides fresh flow and cooling air through the engine. A lot of people have taken that vent tube and that filter from here and ran it up closer to the front of the engine to get more cool air from outside instead of heated air that comes up from the center of the engine. So just a little bit of advice, save you some time. That's what I'm doing on this particular car as far as spark plug gap. And again, you know, whenever I talked about the fuel injection hose replacement, I'm reusing the collars on the fuel lines here and here and here. And I did not paint anything. And then again, you want to make sure these are on there correct to avoid your clip that is coming from your fuel injection wiring. So that's about all I wanted to update right now. That was just a real quick overview on the spark plugs. Those are very, very old. Got those all cleaned up. The other thing I did is before I removed the spark plugs, I went down in there with a pick and went around in the little indentation for the spark plugs and cleaned that out with a pick, right? And then took my air nozzle and sprayed it. And then I sprayed some parts cleaner down in there, and WD-40 anyway, and then sprayed it again. It got that cleaned out. Otherwise, when you remove these, you're gonna get all that crud that builds up around here in between that nut and your seating surface here and your spark plug wire end, and that's gonna fall right down into your cylinder. So we're doing it right. I didn't bore scope any of the cylinders. Typically what I do on any engine is I read the spark plugs, and whenever you see something like that where the electrode is just grown together over time, that's either real bad ignition, lack of spark, or a fuel injector problem. Not so much a rich or a lean condition. It's more so you've got some excess carbon buildup in there, and you might have a valve guide leaking or something like that. But we're going to get those new spark plugs gapped correctly and then back in there, and they should fire right perfectly. And then obviously with the fuel injectors cleaned up, those should fire as well. Cross our fingers, walk with me, and knock on wood if we can find some. There's one. Our air conditioner compressor support tool, fresh from Jaguar. So yeah, again, use these microfiber towels or something. Keep your waffle out of your hands. And in the next video, I will come back. I'll have this torqued. I'll have the distributor cap on. I'll have the coil support housing back on there. That takes a lot of time. These little bolts that you have to get to with various tools takes a lot of time. And that's why you're paying so much at the workshops, because there's a lot of just steps just to get to one thing. The other thing I discovered was, right there, see that housing right there? And above it, there is this little, I think, control valve. There is a clamp on that hose. That hose was almost down an inch, and that clamp was loose. So tighten that back up. So hopefully, I don't know what that is, coolant line, or no, it's air crossover, I guess. I don't know where that line goes up underneath there, so we're going to go research that, and I'll come back with you and update you on the next video. But that's where we're at. Thanks so much for staring at the engine bay, and like I said, this is my vlog for what we're doing to this particular car, this antique car, getting it back serviceable, operable, and back on the road, and maintained, and then get all that goo and crud out of it. I do have a major update to the channel. It is not here yet. I've made room, so when it arrives, it's supposed to be here in the next week or so, and it will be right here in a crate. And it does affect what we're doing on this car a little bit, but we'll update you as soon as that shows up, and I'll go over a review, and probably jump into an assembly video on that one, because that'll be kind of cool for those of you that are doing your own work in your garages and need source for a particular item that is going to make your life very, very, very much more easy, and save your back a little bit. So thanks so much for watching. Give me a thumbs up. Thanks so much for all the other channels doing these XJSs and XJ6 Jaguars. These are turning into vintage cars. They will be around for a long time. Right now, the market is at the bottom. Grab one while you can. They're easy to work on. It just takes a long time to do it. So take your time, be patient, and go through the steps, and follow your workshop manual. Use the tips maybe that I've outlined, or maybe you learned something from this series of videos. Hopefully you have. Otherwise, hit another channel, and there's all kinds of resources out there. But easy, just time consuming. Thanks so much, folks, and take care. We'll talk to you soon.